Guten Morgen, meine Damen und Herren. No, don't worry. This inspirational webinar will be in English as announced. So I'll try again. Good morning, everybody. Just a very short welcome on behalf of Medicon Valley Alliance. My name is David Muniz-Sepanik. I am the Director, Member Engagement and Communication with MVA. I truly hope and believe that you will all enjoy today's well-attended webinar with the title Verify Your Study Design with Regulators and Manage and Contract Your Clinical Vendors Efficiently, co-organized with our member company, Lumis Life Science Consulting. If you get inspired not only by the content of today's webinar, which I know you will, but also by the concept and start to wonder if it would make sense for your company to organize or co-organize an inspirational webinar or a traditional physical good morning meeting with Medicon Valley Alliance, feel free to reach out to me. You will find my contact info on www.mva.org, and it will also appear on the final goodbye slide after the presentations. If you have questions about the MVA membership, how to join MVA networks, which employees of MVA member companies can join free of charge, give me a call or send me an email. If you look at our event calendar, where you also registered for today's meeting, you will also find a number of recently posted MVA member discounts on, for instance, Anglo-Nordic Life Science Conference and BioTrinity in London, if that could be relevant, a relevant event for you and your company. These are partnering events where Nordic companies can meet and pitch to British and European investors. Yesterday, we also published a rather unique and exclusive 25% MVA member discount for Nordic Life Science Days, which will be here in Copenhagen in November. Only MVA members can benefit from this discount and no one else get a full 25%. But back to today's meeting. First, some practical remarks. As you can see, you are automatically muted. You should use the chat for technical questions only, and then use the Q&A for questions to our speakers. And then, of course, you should be aware that this event will be recorded. Enough said on my part. I am not the reason why you tuned in today. So let's fasten our seatbelts and get started. And without further ado, I would like to hand over the floor or the screen to Managing Director Heike Schön and her team, who are the reason why you tuned in today. Frau Schön, the floor, or in this case, the screen, is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for the kind introduction. And also a very warm welcome from us at Lumis Life Science Consulting and Salvius. So for today, we, as David already mentioned, we have the topics how you can best align with regulators on your study design, how to manage and contract your clinical vendors effectively and efficiently. My name is Heike Schön. I'm the Managing Director of Lumis Life Science Consulting, and I would like also to introduce our speakers for today. So we have Christiane Juhls, our Project Director. She will speak about the scientific advice from authorities and the target product profiles as communication tools. And then we have our guest speaker, Myrthe Trompert from Salvius Legal. And Myrthe will address how to use the vendor contract as an important tool to control and oversight and as a basis for constructive collaboration. And myself, Heike Schön, I will talk about vendor management in clinical trials and tools how to avoid potential failures with early warning indicators. So this is just a short introduction to our companies so that you know whom you deal with at the moment. Lumis Life Science Consulting is based in Berlin, in Germany, and we are focused on consulting and to provide tailored solutions for the biopharmaceutical and medical device industry. We are working mainly with small to medium-sized enterprises, and even with startups in biotechnology. So we cover clinical outsourcing strategy to discuss with you what could be your best way, the vendor selection and management, of course, and also clinical and quality oversight. Another part is, at a later stage, the vendor sponsor conflict resolution if needed. We have quality management as a service to set up your SOP system, your quality management system, and regulatory consulting, like we are talking today about scientific advice and supporting you there. With this, I will hand over to Myrthe to introduce Salvius.
Yes, thank you very much, Heike. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Just some information on the company that I'm CEO of. Salvius Legal is a service provider that is specialized in contract management and legal support services for the clinical trial industry. We can deal with all contracts that are required to perform a clinical trial, including site contracts and ancillary contracts. And lately, of course, also a lot of GDPR consulting involved for that matter. But we are also supporting companies with their CRO services agreements and other vendor agreements. And in that context, I'm contributing to the webinar today. So I'm handing over now to you, Christiane.
No, first we will continue.
No? Oh, the topics. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, so I will cover now the topics for our webinar for today. So we will have 3 different sessions. The first one is obtaining scientific advice from regulators. The other one is vendor management strategies in clinical trials. And the last one, the smart contracting, a tool for vendor management and oversight. And we will have at the end a session for question and answers. As David already mentioned, the webinar will be recorded and it will be also available on demand after the webinar. And we have prepared 3 live polls for within each presentation, and we would like to, we will ask you a question and we will provide potential answers. And it would be great if you can respond within 30 seconds so that we can discuss the results. So I think now we will hand over to Christiane for the first presentation. Christiane?
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. Classical mistake. I'm sorry for that. So good morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me now. Can you? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry for that. So it's a live webinar. Now proof is there. Good morning to everyone from my side again. It's my pleasure to talk this morning about obtaining scientific advice from regulators. So first question, of course, is why asking the authorities for scientific advice at all if you are the scientist and a specialist for your own product? The answer is very simple. Authorities are key stakeholders of your drug development, and they can provide supportive expert advice and guidance so that after receiving scientific advice and adjusting perhaps your plans or your clinical study design in accordance to this advice, you may dramatically increase the likelihood of success, especially for clinical trial applications or market authorization applications. Furthermore, early involving authorities can facilitate the communication in later development stages, and especially if the applicability of guidelines is unclear because you are developing innovative or first-in-class products, then it's really good to approach the authorities to get their perspective very early so that you don't go into the wrong direction, to put it very simple. There are some incentives also for small and medium-sized enterprises, especially. The European Medicines Agency, for example, offers reduced fees, but also a higher frequency of getting scientific advice, especially if you are a developer of orphan drugs. And also national authorities may offer additional incentives. However, asking the authorities for scientific advice is also or may also be related to risks. So scientific advice is not legally binding, which is very interesting always, but it's also easy to understand. I will explain that a little later. And fees may add up from 0, as I said just before, to more than 80,000 or even more than 100,000 euro. It is also kind of project to prepare the scientific advice. It requires substantial time and resources on the sponsor's side. And it poses the risk that if the phrased questions or positions are not adequately phrased, they may induce doubts on your study design and clinical program on the authorities' sides. Furthermore, recommendations may become outdated, but will accompany your product throughout the clinical development. And here again, I would like to stress how important it is to prepare very meticulously and adequately. Then I said before, it's good to go early to the authorities if you have innovative products. However, this may also increase the complexity of requirements because the authorities also need to get the information and have to protect the patients and are logically less willing to take the risk than you are probably. Scientific advice on study design contains usually topics like the suitability of primary and secondary endpoints, surrogate parameters, as well as the suitability of available safety information, the choice of comparators, and other topics. How to prepare for scientific advice is a big point. Procedural steps are described in guidelines, which are provided by the European Medicines Agency, also by the FDA. They include electronic data exchange formats, forms, instructions by the authorities, and also briefing packages, how to prepare them. Then meeting date and time and participants, of course, have to be defined in the beginning. And the advice can be obtained in face-to-face meetings, online, or in writing. Some authorities ask the sponsors to write the meeting minutes, then review and amend them, and finally approve them. Other authorities send their recommendations directly in writing. The core of the briefing package, which you need for the scientific advice and have to submit in advance, is the briefing document. To establish such a briefing document, it is important to first analyze risks and open points of your study design, then prioritize and categorize so that only key questions are addressed to the authorities. And here wording is crucial again, which means questions like how to, or when to, or why to are difficult to answer, while questions like questions that can be answered with yes or no are the right questions to be addressed. And here you have to give your position with the briefing package. And this position needs to be clear, well justified, and concisely written for each of the questions you address. The information must be relevant to the authority and well structured. And with that, I would like to introduce you to a tool for providing information in a well-structured way and relevant way, and this is the target product profile. There is no universally accepted definition for a target product profile. Some focus on market needs and business development, some focus on clinical requirements. But from my perspective, the best target product profile definition is the last one in this list here. The target product profile is the profile of the drug you expect to launch, because it includes both the clinical and the market needs. And here, in the next few minutes, I would like to ask you to respond to our first poll. It's 30 seconds only. And the first poll will be the question whether or not you are using target product profiles already. Please answer to the question by clicking on one of the provided answers within the next 30 seconds. Thank you very much. We will look then jointly on the results, at the results. Thank you very much for participating in our poll. And we can see that the majority is not yet using target product profiles, but many people are already, which is very good. And I hope that in the next few minutes, those of you that use it already agree with me that it is a very useful tool, while those that don't use it yet may think about it using it in the future. So target product profiles are so useful because the objectives are clarified and agreed between the stakeholders, and they provide guidance for the development from preclinic to clinic to market launch. They are a tool for facilitated communication between sponsors and regulators and other stakeholders like patients, physicians, but also funders and investors. And overall, they also facilitate the comparison to other investigational and registered medicinal products. Sections that target product profiles may include, and these are only examples, the target disease and the treatment outcome, so also indication, the target population, administration of dosage and other points. And usually, if you use the third definition I showed previously, they also include the cost of goods, target price, time to market. But this is information that usually doesn't go to the authorities. So for each part of communication, you may select parts of your target product profile, depending on the purpose of the communication. And with that, I would like to sum up my part. The scientific advice enables the adjustment of study design and clinical plans, substantially reduces regulatory risks, and increases the likelihood that clinical results will be accepted. Target product profiles are the summary of the intended product characteristics. They also provide guidance from preclinic to clinic to market launch, and overall are a very great tool for facilitated communication between sponsor and authorities and other stakeholders like the patients, and also stakeholders like your clinical vendors, CROs, other clinical vendors. And with that, I would like to hand over to Heike. First of all, thank you for your patience. And Heike will now talk to you about the vendor management in clinical trials. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm muted. Okay. Thank you, Christiane, for handing over. And sorry, somehow this moved back. Okay, technical in the morning. Yeah, my topic is vendor management strategies in clinical trials. And what I would like to cover, sorry, somehow something is happening. I cannot move my slide. Is that my? Okay, now, thank you. Yeah, vendor management and the successful management and efficiently vendor management, to our opinion, starts with the outsourcing, finding the right CRO or the right vendor for your clinical trial. And this also brings us to the point to ask, are you ready to outsource? Because especially for small companies, outsourcing can be a huge burden for the whole company. And you should be ready to outsource and understand what would be the implications. Therefore, we see, are you ready to outsource? Could be an internal, from the internal processes and also from the external processes. So for the internal process, I think it's your internal capability. Do you have the capabilities and the capacities to oversee the whole outsourcing process? And also, what would be the implications to other departments in your company? For example, finance department suddenly have to deal with a lot of more invoices coming from vendors, from sites, or the legal department need to deal with a lot of more contracts, a review of contracts. So these are these questions which should come up before you start outsourcing. Is that really can you cover all these activities? Does your quality management system is in line with the requirements of ICH GCP to perform proper oversight? The processes and communication, are they in place? And what are the costs of outsourcing? It should not be underestimated. You will need maybe more additional people to coordinate all the outsourcing activities, and maybe also involve external support at a certain stage. Then the other part is the external one. Of course, you need to have a good selection process and to develop the contract efficiently with your vendors, which will Myrthe cover at a later point. And then also to create the relationship and the tools for the oversight management. So what we recommend is, there's always a question, how do I find the right CRO at this early stage? And I think you can be even more sure if you engage your CRO or your vendor at a really very early stage than starting your project and supporting get their support also for the study design before you go into final selection of the CRO. Yeah, what you need to do is, of course, you have to document and maintain your oversight. This is a requirement. And always after every clinical trial or every stage of the clinical trial you are outsourcing, I think it's very important to have a lesson learned also together with your vendors. So what is, as a summary, a smart outsourcing strategy? I just want to cover this shortly. It has to fit your business model. So what can you achieve with the outsourcing? What can you cover? If it works well, it should, of course, make your clinical development program more efficient. And it should be built around your core competencies and capacities of your own company. And to select a suitable CRO, I think there are some key points to look at. These are the therapeutic experience and, of course, the geographic reach, which might be important for your clinical trial, depending on your design. The financial stability of the CRO, so checking their public reports and on their own website. So, and looking at some accounting. They should cover an appropriate cost level which fits to your company and your model. And they should have a very good quality management system in place, which you will find out when doing the qualification audit as part of your selection process. And we will cover this also a little bit more in detail at a later point. The company culture is very important. That has to match with you. And also the team should not be underestimated. The success of a clinical trial always depends on the team also, which is working on it. So we come to our first poll in this section. The question is, what is the top challenge of your sponsor-vendor relationship? So it should be, so please answer now. You have 30 seconds. Okay, thank you very much for your participation. Very interesting. So the main challenge seems to be the communication, followed by the budget and the quality management and the timeline. Yeah, thanks. This is a very good result because I think communication is really one key issue. You have to organize and to manage when you are outsourcing internal and external communication. And of course, to follow up on the budget. And yeah, I think let's move now to the possibilities, how to manage communication and budget with the different tools we would like to suggest to you. Next slide. Not working. Okay. Yeah, that's the communication and the relationship building. It takes two to tango. And this is the basis, trust and transparency, and yeah, how to achieve it. One example here as a tool to create a good relationship is to have a governance charter in place. I must say I'm very fond of this because I think it's a very good tool to have a ground of developing your communication tools with your vendors and also the relationship. The governance charter has different layers, and it starts with the project team. The project team are these people who are acting on the day-to-day operations. They handle your project. And then you have the next level, which could be a kind of operations steering committee or a senior level, and they measure the outcomes of the clinical trial and then look to find the most effective and efficient ways to handle your study. And then the third one is the executive committee. And I think it's very important to really have also on the CEO level of the CRO and of the sponsor to communicate in regular intervals. It could be half a year, but just to see that everything is working and that they are aligned on top level. And then also it's much easier for the other layers to align during any kind of escalation process. And we all know there will be some escalation processes needed because a clinical trial never works according to plan. We have patients, we have sites, and we have the vendors. And but the better these teams are aligned and have clear expectations with each other, it's much easier to have also any issues resolved. So that's why a governance charter can really define the processes, roles, and responsibilities. It should have the shared goals and the mission and the vision of the team to join forces to work efficiently together. It defines the escalation procedures and early warning systems, for example, by using key performance indicators or any quality measurements through key quality indicators. And it's a quite comprehensive document. And we would also recommend to have this part of your contract with the vendors. But it should be an agreed document between all participants you want to have in the governance charter. And it's not so easy to negotiate, but it works very well when it's done. It's because you have partners with different structures, different decision-making processes, but you want to create a unique path to move forward. The other way of another tool of supporting also the governance charter is, of course, the key performance indicators. It is, here it is to say that key performance indicators should be defined by the critical success factors of the project or of your company. And that means you should really understand the importance and the impact of the measurements you want to take. So, for example, if the first patient in would be a very important communication to your investors, to your stakeholders, then, of course, one of the key performance indicators should be related to positive ethics committee vote, site initiation, first patient in. So you should have a timeline you can measure to make sure that everything is on track and at fast speed so that you have an early, for example, positive report to the outside. But so that's the important part, that you really focus on the impact of the key performance indicator for your project. And because we have seen a lot of companies, they have huge Excel files, but not everything what can be measured must be measured, because you should have really the focus, what is has the highest impact, and work with your CRO together, because they have the best tools to support your KPI measurements. They have the database, they have normally also, even with artificial intelligence, they can support you. So I think this one can be easily developed also together with your vendors. And it should be regularly reviewed, because it's nothing static. It depends on the phase of the clinical trial and also of the success factors within the clinical trial. The other one is a proactive risk management. This is a very important tool, because you need to have a risk management plan in place to be inspection ready. And because the risk management plan is approved for all auditors and inspectors when they do their inspections. And it's a regulatory requirement by ICH GCP and also by the ISO norm for the medical devices. And it has to have a risk assessment as a quality management approach per clinical trial and for the company, because as a company, you're also going into risk when you outsource. So you have to document that you are aware of the risk, and also that you can find that you have defined upfront warning systems and mitigation strategies when these risks might occur. A risk management plan on all different levels should be available throughout the whole drug development program and also for each clinical trial. So that means, and how can you best do it? Develop a risk management plan for early detection and mitigation potential. Involve your vendors to define the risk management plans for the clinical trial, or ask them even to prepare them. And what also is a very good success factor is to create a risk expert group within your team from different functions. Then we have the sponsor vendor relationship building. Here I will cover shortly what is very important, because you mentioned also your communication difficulties. Have clear expectations with your vendors. As a sponsor, provide clear expectations. Be transparent and open. Involve your CROs. Make sure they also understand what your needs are. The discussion should be solution focused, not blaming each other if something goes wrong. Always go for a solution. Building trust is very important throughout the relationship. It should be at the beginning. Create mission, vision, values together with the team. Manage your risks jointly with your vendors. This is also part of the trust building. And very important, respect the cultural differences you will have. You can be a small sponsor working with a large CRO. You have different decision-making processes, but understand each other and respect it. Understand the organizational structures and the procedures of each other, from the vendor side and from the sponsor side. So I would like to summarize the vendor management strategies. The key success factors are: be ready to outsource and manage your vendors, be ready to understand what you need to have for outsourcing, identify the right CRO and the right vendor, and create a long-term relationship built on trust and respect with the aim to work collaboratively as a team. And implement and evaluate tools to measure success and risk agreed with all vendors. Thank you very much. And I will now hand over to Myrthe.
Thank you, Heike. I will now share my screen. Yes, so I will follow up on Heike's topic on vendor management and elaborate a bit further on how you can use your contract as a tool for vendor management and oversight. So I want to start out with the following. I am a lawyer, so I really enjoy looking at contracts. It's my profession. But I also know and experience that if you want to start a clinical trial and you are more operationally focused, then usually the idea is contracts are boring. Let's get it done with and start with the real work. And it is just something administrative to tackle. And usually or often this creates also a situation where people start late with the contract negotiations. It creates headaches, and actually it is a bit of a missed opportunity to really use the content and also the negotiation process in your benefit as a clinical trial sponsor. Your contract is actually the basis of your collaboration, and the negotiation phase can give you the opportunity to familiarize yourself with your vendor. You can find out what type of vendor I'm dealing with. You can already see the level of their professionalism and professional maturity. You can see if they are very rigid, if they are solution oriented. And you can also explore already what is really important to the other party. And as Heike already mentioned, cultural differences are, of course, something that plays a role when you're conducting your trial, and you need to make sure that you understand each other. So already in this phase, you can find out what are these differences and what you need to take into account on both ends. And further, of course, it sets a good framework on what you can expect from each other, what are each other's responsibilities, and you have mutual commitments, which obviously also eventually will set out for a better chance of success of your clinical trial. Heike already mentioned how important communication and trust is. It also was visible in the results of the poll, that communication was the biggest challenge also. Well, the negotiation process, it is very useful to really establish this communication and trust, and also not start out with a contract that is full of penalties for your vendor, and put all the responsibility on your vendor. It should be a balanced contract, because in practice, I have seen situations where this was the case, and all the team members, they're actually focusing more than on covering their backs, and there is no transparency, so problem solving is really difficult, and this is actually not creating the best situation for the study. So it is a good situation to start out in the negotiations with your vision towards the same objective, which is the proper conduct and successful conduct of your trial. And actually, you have selected your CRO already, and you did not select this CRO for nothing. You have carefully looked at it, and you need to be able to trust your CRO to do a good job for you, because otherwise you should not have selected this party. And this should also be reflected in the contract and in the negotiation process. Of course, as a clinical trial sponsor, your contract with your vendors is really important, because further to applicable legislation, you are finally responsible for compliance with applicable laws and regulations, such as ICH TCP, the Clinical Trial Directive, FDA regulations if you are involved in an IND study, local laws and regulations, and the medical device regulations dealing with medical devices. And towards the authorities and the study subjects, you are finally responsible for a proper conduct of the study and compliance with applicable laws. Having said that, of course, when hiring or contracting a CRO, you can also expect the CRO to take on responsibilities, and they need to be held accountable for proper conduct of those responsibilities. So this is why I have seen, or I also have been in negotiations where the CRO said, well, you are as a sponsor finally responsible always. That's correct towards authorities and subject, but between the companies, between the study sponsor and the CRO / vendor, you can agree on certain terms and conditions that put the responsibility on the CRO, and they need to comply with that. And it is also very important, because if they are not complying, in some cases, then you as a study sponsor are not complying. And finally, you are being held responsible. So yeah, we are talking about debarment and anti-bribery language, for instance, data processing obligations, and but also clauses in your contract that ensure that you can check it and that you can have some control if things are not going really well, because eventually you are finally responsible. How you can use your contract further for control and oversight. Heike already mentioned you can include key performance indicators, certain performance standards, making sure that the staff is not changed all the time. You should put some language in there on audits and inspections, of course, because you are responsible towards the authorities. And according to ICH TCP, you need to make sure that you have direct access to all documentation. Timelines, of course, are very important to put in there and to create some sort of commitment, although there are always conditions under which timelines can change, but it should also not be too flexible, because it is very crucial to your study, and also and for your patients, that things are going according to the set timelines. And of course, you can use smart milestone payments in your contract, and smart change order language to make sure that you only have to pay if certain performance targets are met, for instance. Heike already mentioned also the communication and the governance charter. This is really important. I also mentioned already, it is important to create a safe environment, collaboration environment. So already at the start out, so in your contract, there should not be too much penalties and etc. for your CRO, so that there is an openness to come up with any issues that may arise and any delays that may arise. It is still a human business, so they, as Heike also mentioned, they will happen, and there will be things will not always go according to plan, but then you need to have a structure in place in your contract, and also some sort of trust that is established during the negotiation process to make sure that everybody brings up any issues that may arise, so that together you can come up with solutions, and also that there is a lot of transparency created. So reporting obligations are also very important to include in your contract. The governance charter can be part of the contract, or maybe the main highlights, let's say, and you can have a separate document, but you can also make it part of your actual contract. And it is always recommended that instead of only having the possibility to go to court, to also have the option for mediation or another way to create or to get out of an impasse in a collaboration. Because of course, for the clinical trial, and also for your, especially when patients are included, continuity is key, and you do not want to get into a fight modus right away. You want to make sure that you can resolve it, and if not possible, then of course, as a last resort, there is always the possibility to terminate. But that creates a lot of issues in the sense of continuity, etc., etc. So it is not something to use as a first resort, let's say. Oh, okay. So we come to our third poll. The question is, which template do you use for the services agreement with your CRO or vendor? Is that your own template, of the template of the other party? And you will get 30 seconds now to respond. Okay, so I see that the vast majority is using their own template, and a little less the template of the other party. I will elaborate on that in the next slide a bit further. Oh no, my slide is also not moving. Oh, okay. Just a second. I wanted to discuss how you can use to create a negotiation leverage during the negotiation process. I hope I can get to my next. Okay, I will do something different. Okay. Very important to realize when you are negotiating, you are the study sponsor. And I have seen, especially when smaller biotech companies are dealing with very large CROs, that sometimes the CRO takes the lead in how to negotiate a contract, what should be in there, etc. And the sponsor has less control over the process. And this is something that you really need to be on top of, because eventually it is your study and you are also paying for it. And of course, it needs to be collaborative and constructive as discussed. It needs to be reasonable, but you should not forget that you are eventually the study sponsor. Yeah, so we did the poll on the origin of the template used. It's important to realize that if you get your template from the CRO, that probably it is written in a way that it is more beneficial to them than to you as a study sponsor, which is logical, of course, but you will have more control over the situation if you are using your own template, especially if you use it for multiple CROs, then you also have more control over what you know what you have agreed with all your vendors, which is really helpful for consistency and quality and control as well. Yeah, so another recommendation is to start negotiation timely and have alternatives ready, so that if you have, of course, your negotiation leverage is not very very good if the CRO knows that you need to start tomorrow, and that you do not have any alternatives in place. So it is really recommended to start in time, to have alternatives ready. If it doesn't work out, sometimes it's just not a good match and you find out during the negotiation period, and then it is better that you have this situation instead of rushing it and the CRO having a big leverage on also the content of the contract in the negotiations. And of course, the result of the contract should be very clear and a very fair services agreement between the parties. Now, a short summary. So it really pays off to invest some time and effort in establishing a good services agreement from the very beginning, and enjoy the process. And use the contract negotiations as an opportunity to really get to know your vendor, focus on trust and communication, be aware of the template that you use, and start the negotiations in a timely fashion. And then you can really use your contract and the process as a constructive collaboration tool. Thank you very much. So I'm handing over to you now, Heike.
Yes, thank you. We can leave just the slides on. Is it okay?
Yeah,
and we have now the Q&A session to start with. And so please place your questions into the Q&A option you have on the bottom or on the top of your Zoom. And we have received already a couple of questions, and I will start checking who should answer. So the first question is, will you share the slides and the video? And the answer is yes. So I hope David will also agree to my answer, but I think you will have the slides and the video on demand after the session. And then there's another question is, how do you make sure that you choose the right vendor for a clinical trial FX logistics solution for logistics solutions? I think this is the process itself. I take the liberty to answer this question. Maybe Myrthe, you also would like to add. It is, of course, a process how to choose the right vendor. You can look. I always try also to find some good references about several vendors, not by asking themselves, but also to check in your own network. Because, for example, logistics solutions is very critical, and you need to find a really good vendor suitable for your needs. And so it's a process of the selection and also the quality issue. So you go into a quality audit to understand their processes, their SOPs, and discuss with them processes and SOPs. And of course, going for different references. That would be one possibility. Myrthe, you would like to add for the vendor selection?
Yeah, but for me, it's difficult to add because it's more about the selection than eventually the contracting. But of course, it is a critical vendor type that you also need to negotiate a proper contract with, so that you. But this is not about selection. So maybe I can contribute with another question.
Okay. So yeah, and then there is a question for Christiane. How long does the procedure take to get scientific advice from EMA?
So the question is how long it takes in terms of preparation and so on. So the whole procedure. Okay. That may take, sorry, up to half a year or more. First of all, it's depending on the availability of the authority. So you have to ask very much in advance for an appropriate meeting date and time. And then also time to prepare the scientific advice needs to be calculated. And usually asking first for the time and the date, and then while waiting for the meeting itself, preparing the briefing package is the way to go. And as I said, 6 to 8 months are normal. There are also shorter lead times in national authority scientific advice procedures, and that has to be requested from each authority individually. I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much.
Okay, and here's another question which is directed to Myrthe. How much control need the sponsor execute on contracts with CRO and their subcontractors? Between CROs and their subcontractors. Between, sorry.
I see. So how much control? Yeah. That depends a little bit, but I think, yeah, so here you need to make the distinction maybe between CRO subcontractors and third-party vendors. So if you ask your CRO to contract a central lab or a courier, etc., so then the CRO is usually not fully responsible for the day-to-day operations of this company. It's really a third-party vendor. It's a pass-through cost usually also. They have to contract with the vendors, but usually you can look into them as a sponsor, and it is actually recommended. Here you need to take a little bit of control, because you will be finally responsible for those vendors as well. If something goes wrong, if there are any errors or omissions, then usually the CRO will not take responsibility for that. So here you can take a bit more control. For CRO subcontractors, where the CRO does, for instance, not have any staff in a certain country, or needs to insource statistics or the typical CRO services, then you can just make the sponsor or the CRO finally responsible in their contract. Usually you will not see the financial arrangements between those parties, and then the CRO is just finally responsible for it.
Yes, and maybe also to add from the vendor management perspective, it is also recommended by ICH-GCP in the second revision that you as a sponsor have to be aware of the subcontracting of the CRO and whether the subcontractor fulfills the requirement, for example, for validation procedures, if it's a subcontractor in IT or data management, or when you have decentralized clinical trials. So you as a sponsor, you are still responsible that the subcontractor, which is subcontracted by the CRO, works according to requirements.
But you can arrange, in certain situations, you can arrange this in your contract with your CRO already, and you do not have to take a look at especially with CRO subcontractors, but with third-party vendors, it's different, yes. Thank you.
Okay. So then we have some further questions. Can I, as a small sponsor, outsource to a CRO? Yes, I think that's for me. Sorry. And yes, of course you can, I would say. And but the bigger or the more difference the size of the CRO has, I think you should make sure that you have also very good capabilities to manage the CRO. For example, that you have an experienced project manager, and that you have who can manage the CRO, because the bigger the CRO is, of course, the more professional they are, and not the size of the CRO makes it professional, but you need to have a good, a strong management to work together with a bigger CRO than compared to a smaller CRO, which has maybe some more equal culture with you. And there's another question. As a sponsor, this is for Myrthe, as a sponsor, should I be able to see contracts between the CRO and their vendors?
Yes, I think that's elaborating on what we just have discussed. So I think we're talking about third-party vendors, so these are contracts with parties that do not perform typical CRO services, but the CRO as a service is contracting with those parties, then yes, you can look into them. But if they're dealing with CRO subcontractors, this is usually an internal situation and aspect to it. Yeah, so with third-party vendors, yes. With CRO subcontractors, usually no.
Okay, and then
or did I not answer the question correctly?
No, I think for my
Okay.
answer, it's answered correctly. No, but still, from the procedure, you have to understand also even the subcontracted part by the CRO, so that the subcontractor fulfill the requirements. You don't need to see the contract, as you said, but to make sure that you get the information from the CRO about the subcontractor.
Yeah, that's a good addition. Yeah, thank you.
That's of course. Okay, then I have here another question that's for Christiane. Is it mandatory to have a TPP in place for scientific advice?
Thank you very much for that question. Short answer, no. But it's at least not in Europe. But it's always very beneficial to have it. And FDA has guidelines. They are a little older already, and actually request the sponsor to communicate on the base of a target product profile, and that is mainly resembling the future labeling. And there is a guideline, I think I mentioned that before, which then should be followed for describing the target product profile. Yes, but mandatory in Europe, no. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have 1 minute left for the last question, which is here on. Don't you think the model that small biotechs are contracting with much larger CROs is kind of broken? What would be an alternative solution? Well, actually, I think it depends really on your own organization. I think you still, as a small biotech, can contract with much larger CROs. And to be honest, the majority of all the CROs, even if they are small, they are larger than the small biotech companies. For example, we have biotech companies we are working with 10 people, and they have a small CRO with 300 people working, or 400. So you always have a big difference in size. But the alternative solution, I would say, it really depends on your organization, because you could also have a mix of outsourcing and insourcing. So you could go for functional insourcing. For example, you hire a CRA or several CRAs to perform the monitoring, and the CRO would do just the data management and the evaluation. So this could be an alternative, but as one suggestion, but this takes, of course, a lot of coordination work on your end. So to do this, you have to have the capacities and capabilities in-house. And you work with different CROs and different vendors. To work with means a lot of more coordination. So there's sometimes really the consideration what makes your life easier. And if you go for one CRO, providing all the needs you have, or with several CROs. Okay, so I hope this answered your question. Any further questions you have, you can contact us directly. Our email address is here on the slide, and you will get anyway also the presentation. And I would very much like to thank you for your participation, and I hope we could have provided you with some inspiration in the morning for handling your clinical drug development. And thank you very much for your participation. It was a pleasure for us to have this inspirational webinar. So I hand over to David.
Yes, thank you very much. And just to start by confirming that obviously you can have the slides. We can either attach them to the follow-up email that you will all receive, or we can figure another solution, more a on-demand solution where you can get the presentation directly from Lumis. We will look into that. You will also, in the follow-up email, get a link to the recording of this presentation, which will be published shortly on Medicon Valley Alliance YouTube channel. Then on my part, it's just to say goodbye on behalf of MVA, or maybe see you later. I hope it has been time well spent and that you have appetite for more MVA events in the future. As mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to me if you want to know more about this and other Medicon Valley Alliance event concepts. And of course, finally, I would like to thank Frau Schön, Dr. Juhls, and Frau Trompert, who made this webinar possible and provided the interesting content. And with that said, I think we have reached our destination, and I will conclude this inspirational webinar. Take care out there.